All right, Greg. Excited to chat with you today. I love what you're working on. Obviously, a huge part of crypto is the mining, and people don't see that, but you guys are very much powering the industry behind the scenes. Stronghold, as I understand it, you take the waste coal, primarily, at least initially, from Pennsylvania, which produced a huge amount of steel, and you use that to power crypto mining. Can you tell me a little bit more about that process of taking the waste coal that's out there and then how that actually turns into energy?
You bet. So it's a huge problem, and people don't really know about it, but it's a problem that's been around for more than 100 years. So the byproduct of mining coal is coal waste, and that it really is a result of the good coal, which was used to make steel or power. It's already been burned, and that was burned in thermal coal plants or in the met coal was used to make steel, and those are very specially designed boilers to burn that type of product. The product that came out of the ground that was lower BTU or had rock in it or was marginal in quality, all of that material was left at the side of the mine mouth, and of all of the billions of tons of coal that was mined and used, properly, there were billions of tons that were just left at the surface next to the mine mouth. That is the source of a massive pollution in the coal mining states. Because before 1974, it was legal to mine coal and leave the coal waste at the side of the mine mouth. So as a result of that, there are more than 800 sites that have piles. And I say the word pile as if it's like a pile of leaves. That's not it. These are mountains and ridge lines that are massive in scale. So think about, a gently sloping mountain range. You might have a single pile that has a few 100 million tons in it. We're claiming one site that has it's going to take us about 15 years to clear out all of that waste coal out of a single site. And at the current rate that the industry is cleaning up all these sites, it's 30 years. But the problem, which is more than 100 years old now, if there were a solution to it, other than just picking it up as we do and taking it to what we have, which is a purpose-built site for remediating waste coal, it hasn't been discovered yet. So it's of all of these 800 sites, the resulting water pollution is more than 7,000 miles of streams and rivers that have runoff that has way too much sulfur in it, so the fish can't live. You have about 70 of these sites that are on fire right now. They'll get hit by lightning, or they will combust if exposed, if given oxygen. And they, when they burn in that way, they're emitting obviously carbon, but a lot of the cancer-causing toxins that you really don't want in the atmosphere.
And how many of these are close to where people live? Are they in very rural areas, or are they semi?
It's a few of these sites are really close to Pittsburgh. So there's one that are a famous one for us is called Russellton, and that's about 12 miles from downtown Pittsburgh. So I think the social aspect of it, which I think it's sort of a version of, it's absolutely unfair that you had, mining communities where they might have been mining for 80 years out of a site. The mine shuts down and all the jobs go, and what's left is a smoldering pile of waste that makes a big portion of the community uninhabitable and undesirable. And so these are not, if this problem existed, in a wealthy enclave in New York or California, these problems would have been cleaned up decades ago. So because it's more in rural, poorer parts of the country, with people that don't have as much of a voice, these have been left behind.
Yeah.
So it's I think many Pennsylvanians are aware of the problem or grew up next to a waste coal pile or drove past one on the way to work. So it's really not a mystery to the state. And, so we have the support of the, bipartisan support of the state legislature and governor to clean up these messes. We partner with the Department of Environmental Conservation and Protection and remediation, and sort of picking. They will call us and say, hey, will you come in and clean up a site that is sort of next on their hit list of being the most damaging. But it's a big problem in the state of Pennsylvania, and it's a legacy problem that goes back decades and decades.
In the process by which you collect and process the coal waste, that is a relatively new, would you call it a technological discovery, or is it more using organic matter to process the coal waste and turn it into ash that's then used for energy production? Sure.
So the technology was made popular in the early 90s. So it's not brand new, and it's we have our facilities would cost about $500 million each to rebuild if you were to start from scratch today. So they are not inexpensive, nor are they small. The process is we use excavators and bulldozers and trucks to move the material from the waste sites to our facilities, of which today we have two, one in eastern Pennsylvania, one in western. And that at those sites, the waste is sorted, by its BTU content and by its quality, and then it's processed and put into a boiler that has what's called a fluidized bed technology in it. So most thermal coal plants don't suspend the coal in air while they burn it. They think about like an old locomotive or steamship, shoveling the coal into a boiler. That coal is fine to sit on the bottom of a boiler and it will burn because it's a high enough BTU, like 12,000 BTU. BTU of this waste material is probably half that. And it'll sort of smolder, but it won't really burn unless you suspend it, suspended in air, which our process does.
I see. So the measure of the BTU is effectively the thermal potential. So if I take charcoal that I'm going to cook on a grill, that is probably high BTU because it's made for consumer cooking. But this is like if you're going to hold up heat to it, is the BTU the measure of how much heat can be released? Or is it how much temperature required to release heat?
No, it's a heat measurement. So if you burn it, how much heat or how much energy will be released? So that's British thermal units, which is an energy measurement, probably by pound. So it's purely how much heat will be generated when it combusts.
Yeah.
Or we get about half the amount of heat that usable coal would generate.
And my understanding was, like you said, this has been around for a few decades, but your unique spin on it, which was would you call it a pivot or a growth from the previous business, is that you're now using it specifically for Bitcoin, where previously there was a company using it to extract the energy and sell it into the grid? Or what was that transition into Stronghold from what it was previously like?
Yeah. So, hey, I'm missing my partner, Bill Spence, for this call. He was the owner of the plant that called me to help him, with this project. But as a power plant, hey, if you want to make power, build a nuclear power plant, build a natural gas fired power plant, and that's a more efficient way to make power. Our plant was really designed as an environmental remediation facility where the byproduct is power and beneficial use ash. And so selling power into the grid, it's sort of, it kind of breaks even. It might, with energy prices up a little bit now, we'll do okay, but you're not going to make you're not going to have a fantastic business just selling power into the grid. Or at least that wasn't the case a few years ago. So to the power plant's credit, they began to play with and experiment with running Bitcoin mining machines, which in our view, Bitcoin mining is really just a power arbitrage business. And so maybe about 3 years ago, the Bill and those at the plant began to experiment in a beta test way. And then in late 2020, we said, hey, why don't we do this in an industrial scale kind of way, in which we planned out the necessary infrastructure modifications to the facility to set up electric distribution and create a big data center at the plant. And that was the late 2020. I would say was the design work, and all that was installed starting early 2021, and that's what got us in business. So we went from I'd say beta testing our own to thinking maybe we'll sell power to those crazy Bitcoin mining guys to deciding, hey, we're better off instead of hosting mining Bitcoin for ourselves, which is the route that we've taken.
Yeah, it seems to me like the like you said, it's an arbitrage. So whoever has the lowest means of production of energy ultimately is going to be able to make the most money in Bitcoin mining. There's got to be a significant, would you say, talk to me about the other side. I'm curious to just say we're just going to turn on Bitcoin mining. You need to build. How complex is the technical infrastructure there? Is it a matter of just purchasing the servers off the shelf, or is there a lot of software engineering or data engineering to set all that up?
Yeah, you know what? So we're vertically integrated. So obviously, if we're running a power plant, we have teams of electrical engineers, teams of guys that are welding and fixing things. And so for us, I think it was probably easier for most. I think there are probably dozens of examples of guys that were mining Bitcoin, getting free power from their parents, hey, and deciding, hey, I can make this. We got to do this in industrial scale. You then find out industrial scale is a much different operation than running a couple of miners at home, and it's heat management. If you co-locate at a power plant, we had to bring our electrical voltage down from 110,000 volts to the usable voltage for machines, which is 415. And that means a lot of transformers. We designed our own pods to house, about 250 Bitcoin mining servers per pod. And all of those have, you then have heat issues, you then have airflow management issues. And so, you learn as you go, but after having now done this for, a couple of years in the beta test phase to now industrial scale, we're actually, we're fairly efficient at it. And we're working on more high-tech solutions that you wouldn't dream of if you weren't of scale. Like an example of that is right now we're developing software ourselves that will, with the click of a mouse button, take the miner power usage down and their processing down from 100% down to just above zero. Basically, put the miners in sleep mode, and that's going to let us divert power from our data center back to the grid. Should the grid need that power on an emergency basis. And the reason we'd be interested in doing that is that, hey, we're a power plant, we're hooked up to the grid. And if the grid needs the power, that's sort of the contract that you have with the, with your communities and with the grid that we are a part of, which is PJM, that should that power be needed, we will deliver it. Usually they give us a day's notice for when they may want the power. But they would give us an extra sort of bonus payment if we were able to deliver that power, instantaneously, which is what this software can do. So it's which ends up getting very complicated. So from our vantage point, hey, there are many that just buy miners and they'll pay others for the power, and they'll pay a third party to host the miners in their pods. And hey, if Bitcoin is, goes from here to 100,000 and hash rate doesn't grow all that quickly, hey, those will be proven to be the smartest guys in the room. But if Bitcoin stays around here and you see hash rate grow, you will see compression of margin in Bitcoin mining, and you're going to care immensely about cost. And so I think from our vantage point, owning our own power assets gives us the lowest variable cost. Managing our own data center that we built ourselves gives us the lowest CapEx and the lowest OpEx cost that can be achieved. And so in a bear market or a down market, I think we will be proven to have margin preservation when others may not, and we have all of the upside that everyone else has. So it's I think we didn't go into my background, but I spent 20 plus years in energy investing in private equity. The last 10 before Stronghold at Apollo. And so thinking about downside protection, which is not really, most Bitcoin investors are, are probably describe them as true believers in blockchain and Bitcoin and it's going to the moon and, don't be a naysayer. And I hope they're right. But hey, if it takes longer or if there are cycles along the way, surviving will give you a lot more, it'll be a lot more entertaining and much more beneficial for the investors than if you don't. So I think we've tried to build a model that has all of the upside that every other miner has, but that has a lot of downside protection to it.
In the downside, so when the price of Bitcoin goes down and the hash rate goes up or remains where it is the hash rate what's most closely correlated to the price of mining? So if the hash rate goes, or is that more the demand side? So as the hash rate goes up, then there's a higher demand for mining, or what's that relationship?
I was thinking about it this way. So the higher the Bitcoin price goes, the more economic it is to mine for Bitcoin. And so you can expect more miners to be plugged into the network to do all the work. And you're sharing the rewards of Bitcoin mining among the entire group. And so, think about, hey, more people mining, your slice of the pie is relatively smaller. And the higher the Bitcoin price is, the more economic it will be for older machines to stay on the network or for newer machines to be built and for capital to be invested in the industry. So it's absolutely correlated, and the converse is also true. If Bitcoin prices drop, don't expect a lot of new capital to come into the market. Don't expect a lot of new machines to come online. In fact, you might expect some machines to unplug. If you're losing money mining, you should probably unplug your machine. And that's what happens. So our cost of power, like when we're fully operational and have everything all tuned up, it should be under 2 cents, which I think our estimate, it's about half of the industry average.
Okay, so another way to say that would be if there's a utilization curve, you're going to have there's more prices at which you can remain profitable. I mean, if Bitcoin drops to $100 per coin, maybe you guys, is that how you think of it? Like there's a 15,000, if it drops below 15,000, we're not profitable, or there's some, does every miner have that number in their system?
So every miner will have a number where a price for Bitcoin and a global hash rate or an expected reward number where they'll say, hey, turn off the miner. From our vantage point, we have yet another variable, which is how much can we sell our power for in the open market.
Oh, interesting.
And that's what makes us unique. So, hey, if Bitcoin mining isn't economic, okay, well, hey, we have this power plant here. Why don't we, instead of sending power to an uneconomic data center, we'll send the power to the grid, and we can make money at grid pricing. So we're never going to be in a cash negative situation because of that fact. I guess that it could happen if power prices went to zero and Bitcoin went to zero. Then sure, we're going to be stuck like everybody else. But our feedstock is practically free. We have to pay the trucking cost and maybe pay a royalty in a site or two, but we have really uncorrelated power pricing costs, where most power in our area is really dictated by the price of natural gas, and so we're decoupled from natural gas in terms of our costs. Yet we get the benefit of high natural gas prices and the prices of power. So it's I view our business as a giant power arbitrage machine that's also making the grid more reliable with the a continuation of the kind of greening and renewable energy segment of the power economy.
Interesting. Okay. And this is fueled, your business in particular is fueled by the 200 million tons of waste coal. I mean, that's not something you're going to go through in the next few years. That's going to be available for decades.
Yeah, that's a single site. And so there are 800 of these sites, probably with billions of tons.
Wow.
So
okay.
The latest estimates have been, hey, the industry has 30 years of work to do to clean up the sites, but I'm not sure they even know where all the sites are. And when you really get down into them, some of them are, a couple 100 feet deep, and you might have thought they were 30 feet deep. So I think we're not in the early days of the cleanup, but it's decades to go.
Do you have an idea as to what I would imagine the grid where you are is the grid restricted? This is probably a question generally speaking about grids, but is the grid localized to a city, or do you think of the grids as is the way that we've constructed grids like on a city mesh network? So when you're producing electricity, could the price per kilowatt hour end up, or is it lower in the grid that you're powering versus like Los Angeles or other places?
Yeah. So when you think about the national grid, there are regional networks as well. Ours is called PJM. In Texas, it's called ERCOT. And even within PJM, there are nodes that have their own pricing. So when you might have a constraint or a plant down in a node that might make power pricing of that node higher, or you could have a blown up transformer or a switch yard that's down that could get rerouting that would give you a unique power pricing scenario. But it is the big crisis that we have created with the energy transition. Like energy transition, I mean going from baseload fossil fuel plants like coal, nuclear, gas, to intermittent renewable sources like wind and solar, is that our grid, which is already old, was not designed for intermittent sources of renewable energy to be inputted into it. And the way that the world is compensating for that fact is by installing batteries to run when the solar field isn't running, or when the wind isn't blowing, the wind farm isn't making energy. The issue with batteries is obviously they create a lot of land and water pollution to make the battery in the first place. They don't last very long in terms of, maybe they last, 10 years, but like just look at your computer phone or your cell phone battery. The half-life of that, is a couple of years long. So they're not great as they are. And then when they're drawn upon, you might get a couple of hours out of them, but to get a battery to power the entire grid, like you can't get a battery big enough. So it's really an imperfect solution. What Bitcoin mining offers, and I think it was talked a lot about like during the Texas kind of blackout of last year. If you have power that's being generated, that's being used to mine Bitcoin, and it's a traditional fossil fuel asset that's running to power that data center, a Bitcoin is great, but it's not a life and death mission. You can shut the data center down for a day or a few hours without really impacting, people's livelihoods all that much. The nice part about having a power plant that's up and running with a demand source, Bitcoin mining, that can be diverted to the grid, is that acts like an effective battery that's not going to run out of juice in 2 hours, and all that power can be diverted within milliseconds. I would argue maybe even more quickly than a battery can get to its full burst of load.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. So it's you describe it as a battery, so the Bitcoin mining operation itself. So moving from just a fossil fuel means of production into the grid. In lieu of that, or in addition to that, you have Bitcoin mining. In the case of Stronghold, your cost of production is lower. So one thing I don't understand is why would when you describe it as a battery, wouldn't the direction you're pointing energy to, you're either selling energy to Bitcoin. I mean, I think of it as like you're selling into the Bitcoin grid or the electrical grid. Aren't you always going to, as an energy producer, you're always going to sell it into the grid that has the highest price? So in the same way, the price for the electrical grid it spikes when there's an outage, giant transformer blows up. Or if the price of Bitcoin drops tremendously, you pump it into the grid. So do these prices ride close to each other? I mean, most days is it a wash whether you could sell it into Bitcoin or into the electrical grid?
So today, selling power into the grid, I can look it up and tell you where PJA pricing is right this very second. Usually it's around $50 a megawatt, lately. That's what you could sell power into the grid for. A Bitcoin price equivalent, so today, right now, in our segment, our node, it's $37 a megawatt. So that's what we can sell power for into the grid. The economics of using that power to mine Bitcoin today, we earn more than $250.
Oh, okay.
$250 a megawatt. So it is a
huge,
much more economic activity to sell power to ourselves and use it to mine Bitcoin. There are times though when the power demands are high, where you could see north of $100 a megawatt for power, and I think there are times when the grid actually just needs our power, and because we earn a capacity payment from from PJM. We are obligated to, during those times, certain times, which happens a handful of times a year, they will call us and say, hey, you must deliver your power to the grid. And they pay us, I think we get between our two plants, $5 or $6 million a year in payments for the service of delivering power to the grid when it's needed.
I see.
So there are times that's not optional, and then there are times when it's optional.
And in return for that, are these plants producing, what percentage of the energy the plants are producing goes to Bitcoin mining versus the grid? Is it only a few days a year they go to the grid, or is it?
Yeah, no, it's a handful of days a year, or it may be even a couple. It's in aggregate, or it could be a couple hours in a day. And so it's these are 80 megawatt power plants, of which we have the electrical infrastructure built out for a 70 megawatt data center. So I think we're always tied into the grid. So we're always going to be delivering a little bit of power to the grid to stay in sync with the grid, have that connectivity, to then have the power flows rise and fall as economics would dictate.
Why have maybe this has happened and I don't know, but have the prices of electricity gone up for people in their homes and on the grid because there have been a diversion from power producers saying, if I'm looking at $250 a megawatt hour megawatt to 35, it's like, why doesn't every major power plant, as long as they're not publicly owned, just start producing on Bitcoin? Or has that happened? Yeah,
you know what? I get that question a lot. So, hey, the typical, in fact, Senator Warren asked that question in an open letter, not an open letter, I guess it was an open letter, to a handful of Bitcoin mining companies. So we represent, PJM, our grid is a 70,000 megawatt grid, and our little power plants are 160 megawatts in aggregate. And we are, and as I said earlier, the prices of power are really dictated by the price of natural gas. And so we can't really, our little 160 megawatts out of 70,000, we don't move the needle at all. I think and so that's sort of part one. Part two, why isn't every power business converting their power to Bitcoin? It takes effort and ingenuity. I think you could there are many uses of power that would earn a user more economic advantage than just selling the power in the grid, like using the power to make aluminum, for example. They can, but it takes know-how, takes some entrepreneurialism, which I think most public utilities, I'm not sure that's what they're famous for, not to insult them.
Yeah, no, they're not.
And it's not their core business, you know. I think what we're trying to build is a company that has optionality. Even the data centers that we're projecting to be building in the future, we're contemplating putting in more sophisticated buildings where you could do, cloud computing or AI or, Hollywood movie rendering. It's a because I think you sort of think, hey, Bitcoin we think has a bright future, makes a lot of sense. But hey, if it doesn't work or it's regulated out of existence, you want to still have a purpose. Is these are big infrastructure builds, and so we're just trying to, and it's not that much more expensive to build a what I would call a proper data center than it is to build our pods, and so we're likely to take that route, and we'll still run the Bitcoin mining machines in those data centers, but we'll have yet another option should we find that Bitcoin mining isn't economic someday.
And would you do that? Because it almost seems like there's a business where you guys vertically own the stack. Is there a company now, or is this potentially in the Stronghold future where you have and tell me if this is what you're describing, but there's a 18-wheeler that's got servers and all sorts of hardware on there, and it just bolts right up to any power plant in the country, and it gives the option for the people in that power plant to say, hey, do you want to divert attention or energy to Bitcoin or any of the other options you described? So thinking it like you sell that widget that bolts onto other power plants?
You know what? So the infrastructure that you need to install to modify the power plant is multi-tens of millions of dollars to install. And the reason is power plants make power to deliver to the grid. And I think that you have to, access what's called the bus duct. That's the point at which you exit the building, the boiler building that has the generator in it, and go to a small switchyard that makes it to the grid. So you're doing sort of massive scale electrical engineering projects, and it will require you, tens of millions of dollars. Probably at least a year of planning, if you even know what you're doing. Yeah. So I think the idea to have I think it's an interesting idea to have, hey, why don't you just roll this semi-trailer up full of Bitcoin mining equipment and plug it in?
Not that quite easy, huh?
Yeah. The issue is the plugs aren't designed that way.
Yeah.
You have to invest a lot to get them. I think you could do it in a small way, maybe for, I would bet most power plants, and maybe not even aware of it, you probably have 3 to 5 megawatts of power available at the plant, like through welding outlets. And you could, in theory, plug, a handful of megawatts of miners in those outlets and take advantage of cheap pricing in that way. But you're not going to get a 50 megawatt data center out of it that way. Yeah. No, my first job, how I paid my way through college, I went to school for mechanical engineering, and I had a part-time 20 hours a week job throughout the whole time at UConn. And it was at a cogeneration plant on campus. So I would go pretty much whenever I had a break from class and go into the power plant, and I would I'd draw up all the piping throughout the whole system. They had no drawings. So I'd walk around and draw up all the lines, and got to pretty much go everywhere across the whole plant. And it was fascinating to me to see how this whole system works, but no one has any idea. No student is allowed in there. They don't really understand where energy comes from. And I think similar to money, energy is one of these hugely important utilities and infrastructures networks that we have. But when you don't see behind the scenes, you don't see how money is printed and how banks distribute it and how all this works, you just kind of use your credit card and your bank account, or in this case, you turn on the light switch. But now people, I think, are becoming much more aware and interested in energy and money, and both how they work and the implications that these decisions that we're starting to make have, where it's really fascinating. It's like
most people, I think even in their 20s, couldn't describe what the grid is, what a transformer does, how we produce energy, what decisions between coal, natural gas, nuclear. But the conversations are starting to happen. And I think about like one that's come up a lot was nuclear, pros and cons, sustainable energy. Does it make sense to put a solar panel on every house and just have massive subsidies for that? Or does it make sense to invest in solar power plants where we just centralize all the collection of solar and then pump it into the grid? And like the answer to that is not simple. And it seems like there's diverse approaches that politicians and entrepreneurs have taken. I'm curious, you invested a lot into the energy. You spent a long time probably looking at decks and talking to founders and assessing companies. Are there takes that you have on the direction you think that we should go as a country, or maybe even specific to cities, or things that you think like what are we doing wrong and where should we go?
Yeah, I was thinking about the title of a book is like, hey, why the green energy revolution is failing and how to fix it. I'd say
should write it.
It's what we're doing is popular, and it's going to continue to happen. And what we're doing is installing solar and wind. There is a belief that is a myth that solar and wind is now cheap enough to be on par with conventional fossil fuel generated electricity prices. And that would be true if the sun were shining 24 hours a day, but it doesn't. It shines for, 10 to 15 hours a day. And so it's then you need to add a battery to get the equivalent of the fossil fuel generation. You need to then add a battery, and then you need a much bigger solar field in order to feed that battery, because that has to run at night. So it's just the math around the economics still suggest that renewable energy is about 3 times the cost of fossil fuel generation. And you can understand that better when you look at the grids in the world that have the highest percentage renewable energy in those grids also have the highest cost of power in the world. And that's that biggest tell as to what actually is happening. So I think what we're doing is a very regressive thing. So we're going to basically give, Americans or global citizens a cost of power that's 3 times what we had before, and I'm not sure that we're really getting what we think we're getting in exchange for that. Solar panels don't last forever. Wind farms don't last forever. They're intermittent, and that's not even speaking to all the trillions of dollars that you have to invest in the grid to even make that work at all. It wasn't designed for this. And we're doing that at the same time that we are electrifying cars and industry, which is great. Who doesn't want to have less carbon, less pollution in the air? Everyone wants that. But, so I guess you asked, how do you fix it? Like my view, which is not a popular view, is that we have a, 50 or 60-year-old technology that's carbon free, that was designed for the existing grid infrastructure that works 24 hours a day. And it's nukes.
Yeah.
It's nuclear energy.
Yeah.
Nuclear energy.
It just seems like, how about this? What do you think about this? So if you almost like take a bigger, like macro perspective, you say, boom, we have the Big Bang, then suns collect energy, and then planets that are cooler form around the suns, and our energy that we consume comes from the sun. Like fossil fuels are dead animals that have crystallized in the ground, fossilized in the ground, pressurized, and then we burn them. And that carbon is the molecular makeup of those animals and plants. Nuclear energy nuclear energy is the energy contained in the molecules itself during the star's explosions. And it seems to me like the evolution of a society would be, first, you're capable of doing wind energy, right? Water energy. You can see that in, old windmills and old hydro plants. Then you discover the gold in the ground, the fossil fuels, all different forms, energy or fossil fuels like natural gas and gasoline that we turn and pump into the cars. But the most complex way to harness energy is nuclear energy. And maybe we did it too early. I don't know the reasons why there was these large meltdowns in the past, but it seems to me that deep down inside, people are still scared of that. And that fear is what pressures politicians to not put forth serious plans to integrate nuclear energy. And I don't know, are there countries now that are setting good examples? I know Germany was using a large part of nuclear energy as their energy production, but has that changed? I think they rolled back those plans.
It's hard to believe what Germany did, not to insult, the Germans, but they shut down their nuclear power plants, which were carbon free. Didn't really have a backup plan. They were counting on more renewable energy. They ended up importing like really dirty coal-fired production from their neighbors. So they ended up in a much worse place. If you looked at Germany's carbon footprint pre Fukushima, when they shut it down post that, they're much worse than they were, and they're now hostage to Russia.
Yeah, terrible. Did they shut down their plants because of Fukushima?
Yes, they did.
Wow.
And by the way, if any culture of engineering talent could run nuclear power assets, it's Germany. If they can't do it, no one can do it. But I think if you looked at the 3 nuclear accidents the world has had, and that's where we're sort of going down a rabbit hole. Maybe this is what you're looking for, but Chernobyl, Fukushima, 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island was like a disaster averted. Like no real radiation was emitted. I'm not sure anyone even died. Chernobyl was a huge disaster. Fukushima was a disaster. Chernobyl was you should watch the Netflix show on Chernobyl.
Yeah,
that's just that's human error, not technological error. Fukushima was design error. They put a plant in a tsunami prone area and put the backup generation in a place that could get wet. And so it was not, I think, even so, if you looked at the deaths from nukes, it's a fraction of any other of the existing industries. Probably even like number of people that probably die installing windmills. It probably exceeds the number of people that have died in nuclear accidents.
Yeah.
So it's just not and we have our government's using nuclear powered submarines, nuclear powered, aircraft carriers. So it's not like we can't build these things. Heck, now we can build them in a small size and make them mobile. So it's not like it's a technology we can't handle. We're doing it.
Yeah.
But it's not a populist thing to say.
Why is that? I mean, to me, it sounds like everything you said right now sounds pretty incontrovertible. Is it that people just
because no one wants it in their backyard?
Right.
No one wants it in their backyard.
Right.
And so probably the reason why you need government is like, hey, the existing nuclear facilities, hey, that plant's already in the backyard, it's aging. Replace it with another nuke. Don't tear it down and replace it with a wind farm that's not going to be effective. Replace it with another. The nuke is already in the backyard. Just replace it, and then design it with that's why government exists, to regulate and make sure things are safe. We should be able to do that here.
Yeah.
And then
I agree.
The nuclear waste you can end up in I think the government ought to really support processing of that waste, and that's what France does. And that's why they've been successful. But
is France largely run on nuclear? Do you know the breakdown of it?
I think the majority is nuclear energy in France.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's hard to disagree, frankly. I guess people just don't want it near them. Is it possible to extend the distance from the grid to the production of nuclear? Like, could you put it 100 miles away or more than that? Or is there just deterioration in the energy loss?
No, you could just build transmission lines to carry the energy. That's so. I think we have if you fly across the United States, we have plenty of open space. Yeah, out here.
And why not? I mean, could you have like all the nuclear energy production in the center of the country where no one is, and just pump it out? I mean, maybe not that distributed.
You max out at a couple of gigawatts or 2,000 megawatts or so per plant.
Yeah.
Before you end up with grid troubles, you want to have it fairly well distributed out to where closer to where the power is being used to be better. But I mean, they could. It's that project is a fraction of the project of adding all the solar and wind we're adding, and the cost of handling it that way. And like we're choosing voluntarily the hard way, which is anyway we're crazy to do it, but that's what we're doing.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. Is there some potential other explanation to this? I mean, do you think there's some kind of lobbying or political agenda? I mean, to me, it does. I don't see it, but maybe it's there. I don't know that there's green energy, windmill farmers or somehow,
Oh, it's a good political soundbite.
Yeah,
we're gonna put up a clean energy, carbon free, windmill or solar plant. What they don't go on to say is, well, your power is going to end up costing 3 times as much, and the pollution from the batteries, that have to go to make it the same. It doesn't really, the negative aspects of it are omitted. But anyway, that's what we're doing. So I don't want to, hey, I'm not against solar. I'm not against wind. Yeah. I'm just saying, hey, if the country were run by a king, you wouldn't do what we're doing. You would say, hey guys, we studied it. This is foolish. We're going to end up with a power that costs much more for our residents, and doing it this way, as long as we run it safely, and it's not brand new. It's not a new tech. This is 50-year-old technology.
God, yeah.
It's not a new idea.
No, I know. It's wild. It's wild. But like you said, yeah, we're going down that road, and it really is the price of moving too quickly. Like there will be a point at which it makes sense, but maybe not if you had nuclear online. But I hear this debate when people talk about government incentives for green technology, whether it's cars or energy production or whatever it is, but that it's better to be early than late. And that there's truth to that. You don't want to do nothing ever, but if you move too quickly and you end up jacking the price of energy by 3 times, like the negative externalities of that can be like hugely costly and hugely guaranteed to happen. Like we're not rolling the dice here. It's like, yeah, if energy went up 3 times, the negative impacts of that economically are going to be huge. And a lot of people are going to die as a result of that. So yeah,
the unintended consequences of policy, we'll find out, but I think we're living through it.
Yeah. Do you have other things? Give me a sense for how many companies you've looked at in the energy space, or how many different projects you've assessed. Is it in the tens or hundreds? I'd imagine there's not as many.
Oh, it depends on in which context. As an energy investor, thousands.
Yeah, thousands. Yeah.
As in the renewable energy space, it's not not quite as many, but if you've been in this business, you know what the real economics are, and some people will make a lot of money developing these assets, but I think it's just not talked about as to what happens, and what the impact is on overall pricing.
Right. Where do you see the most interesting aspect? Certainly, crypto mining is a space where a lot of people are investing, and there's a lot of lucrative returns. Nuclear is off the table, but if it weren't, then people could be building plants, and there'd be a lot of explosive growth in that category. People are building windmills, solar panel companies. Are there other areas of energy that you see as being really high growth right now, or exciting and innovative?
I love what we're doing.
Yeah.
At Stronghold, being like the vertical integration of our model, owning the power, fixing an environmental crisis that's happening in Pennsylvania, using Bitcoin to effectively finance it all, without government help. I think it has resonated with a lot of people. So I wouldn't change what we get to do in the team that we have to do it. I'm very, very lucky to be involved. I think, I would not, I wouldn't put anything ahead of what our activity is at Stronghold. And I think the Bitcoin mining industry is I'd be surprised if in 5 years, the majority of the industry isn't also vertically integrated.
Really? Yeah.
Meaning owning the own power assets. It doesn't, the economics of it are good today. but hey, it's a cyclical and volatile market that will have diminishing returns as hash rate grows, and with halvings that we'll see a halving coming up in 2024. That will probably wake the industry up to, hey, control your costs. But by then it's too late.
Yeah. No, I think you guys are probably one of the most exciting companies in the space. You IPO the company last year,
October of
2021, right?
Yeah.
When you look forward, are there obvious implications of that? Is the access to capital? Like, why go IPO? Is it just easier access to capital?
That's a great question. So we took two private rounds of financing in early 2021 that obligated us to either sell the company or take the company public within 9 months or so.
Really?
So we had an obligation to our investors to do it, but it was an extremely fast timeline. And with all of the and Bitcoin mining, our Bitcoin pricing on the day that we priced the IPO was around just under $60,000 a coin. So it was a great time to go public and raise that capital. I think since then, we've seen volatility, and prices are around $20,000 lower than they were last October. So I'd say the market has cooled off substantially since then, which it makes us happy that we got access to the capital that we received in the IPO to be able to execute on our business plan. I think there are dozens and dozens of companies that saw what we did and what others did to get public, and were on our heels, to also get public, and they missed the window. So they did not get access to the public market capital, and they're now left with a half-built business or an underfunded business, and we'll see what happens to them. But for those that get access to the capital, that have the capital that they need, we're better off with the industry being underfunded from here, because you won't see the growth in hash rate that you would have seen had everyone had access to another $5 billion or whatever was in the queue.
Yeah. And how much did you guys raise, and what do you spend it on?
Yes, we raised about $140 million, and we used the capital to buy a second power plant, to modify that plant, to make it possible to buy Bitcoin there, and we used it to buy Bitcoin mining machines.
It's awesome. So one of the plants was the first one on the east side or the west side of the state?
The first plant's called Scrubgrass, and that's in western Pennsylvania, about an hour and a half north of Pittsburgh. And the second one is in eastern Pennsylvania, about 2.5 hours from New York City.
Awesome. Are you there now?
I'm in New York today.
Oh, nice.
I was in Pennsylvania yesterday, Pennsylvania tomorrow. So while we're growing, it is not a hands-off operation for sure.
How many people? Like, what's the composition? It's rare that I talk to people who are running power plants. Is it pretty much from the outside looking like a power plant where you have like you said, electrical engineers, hardware engineers? What are other types of people around there?
So it's about 40 full-time employees to run the plant, and that's it's running all year long. So it's 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So it's multiple shifts to run. If you were to go into the control room, and so you'll have 2 or 3 guys in a control room. The big building with the boilers in it doesn't have anyone in it unless something's being repaired, because it's it's all automated from the control room. So it's given the size of it, like these are massive, like 7-story buildings that have a really multi-acre footprint, and so it's surprisingly few people run it. But hey, we need engineering talent. So when something breaks, you need an engineer to diagnose and fix it. So you'll have at least a couple of those. You need the laborers that have the coveralls on to go in and actually do the work to repair. You'll need to have plant managers that will schedule and coordinate with those that are remediating waste sites, and coordinating 60 to 100 truckloads of that waste coming in a day. We'll We'll have people on staff that are working on.
Wait, can I pause you? You have
finding and selling all the ash.
You have 100 truckloads of that waste coming in every day
per plant.
Wow, that's
and
wild.
It's still 30 years. Just the quantity is when I describe the scale of these things, like if you're in Pennsylvania, give me a call. I'll show it to you. You won't believe it. It's just hundreds of acres of land that is scarred by, coal waste, and you'll see it backing up to neighborhoods.
Wow, that's wild.
And they're toxic.
Yeah,
we need to clean them up because it is not okay to leave them as they sit.
Man,
but yeah, it's hundreds of loads.
So there's hundreds of truck drivers driving these things.
Truck drivers, and then that's not even, then the data center will have another 20 people per data center. And then we'll have, I was there yesterday, but there are probably, 60 contractors' trucks there working to, finish off the electrical installation of the data center. Then we'll have another group that builds the pods. So it's you end up impacting hundreds and hundreds of people. And these are usually the highest paying job in the counties where we run these things. So it's good for the communities. Yeah,
it's great for them. I mean, it's feed 3 birds with 1 scone. It's clean up the waste out there in the forests and the plains, and then help people with great jobs, and then help power the Bitcoin economy. Are there other cryptos you would power? I mean, do you see the evolution of mining changing in any substantial way? Obviously, Bitcoin's the big one, but there's other proof of. You know what? Bitcoin is the one that has the most institutional adoption from an investment standpoint. So that's where we focused. But I think there are absolutely other uses for the power, and I think it's obvious this is an industry in its infancy. The fintech industry, the blockchain. I'm excited to see where this all goes, because there will be probably very few exceptions to industries that aren't impacted by it. Yeah, it does have the ability to modify the way we transact and interact. Probably as much as the invention of the internet did. Yeah. Are you using it personally? Do you see people using Bitcoin personally, other than just to hold on to? You know what? I'm begging Amazon to put a purchase Bitcoin price on the website. I suspect they're going to come up with their own Amazon coin, but maybe they'll tie that to Bitcoin. So no, my exposure to Bitcoin. Hey, we have obviously a lot of exposure in Stronghold's wallet, and I'm a big owner of Stronghold as well. So I am obviously, hey, I have a Coinbase wallet as well, but most of my exposure is through Stronghold. There was a piece of, I don't know if you call it advice. It was just a thought that somebody I interviewed suggested, where he said, if you want to look at the crypto projects that are worth investing in, look at where the Bitcoin mining companies allocate their mining resources. So they're going to be very critical of what projects they mine, and they're going to tend to mine the projects that they see the biggest growth in the future. Aside from Bitcoin, do you think that's, maybe even including Bitcoin, is that a strategy? You guys are very much plugged into Bitcoin. It sounds like just staying there. Yeah. But other crypto mining farms are, they have more diverse cryptos that they mine. Does that make sense to you? Of course. Yeah. No, that you should study the economics of every coin and pick the one that gives you the best return. And I think our view is, hey, we're happy to study these things, but the economics of mining Bitcoin are substantial enough not to waver. And as a public company, we told the market what we're doing, so we're trying to execute on that plan as best we can. But yeah, we will be looking at other uses of the power to mine other currencies if they make sense. And when are you going to write this book? World needs it. No, I'm not going to write it. I just think it's only
I went on too long about it. I should have talked about Stronghold more, so I apologize about that. But
the diverse conversation, honestly, is what's interesting. Like, it's not a commercial by Stronghold. You guys are doing amazing things. But part of the exciting part about having long form conversations with people like you is you have such a depth of insight into this industry that it highlights it. Like I was listening to a podcast 8 years ago, and it was an interview with a founder, and he was talking about a problem in like point of sale marketing, and he was never going to solve it. He was never going to work on it, but he knew all about it. He described it, and I went out and I started a company, helping to solve this problem, and it helped me like fill in the gaps of the understanding of the market, because how else does information and knowledge get transferred if it's not through people who have acquired it? So. Thank you for going down the path, expressing your opinion about energy.
I think the book has been written, and it's not really what I'm saying is not a mystery to those that are. If you're in the business, But hey, we're a populist society, so hey, we're going to do, but I think our beliefs are misguided. So I think you probably thought before this talking to me, maybe, hey, solar and wind, they're as cheap as everything else. So, they're on par with. It just doesn't happen to be true. That's the issue.
Yeah, no, that's an inconvenient fact. I heard solar, just by putting up the solar panel on roofs, you pay more in the insurance and the manual labor that the guy has to come up and install it. What if he falls off the roof and he hurts himself? It's like versus have a completely autonomous solar panel, plant somewhere. It makes more sense, but politically you create more jobs if you have solar panels installed on roofs. Maybe it sounds better to people, but part of our challenge as a society is like just developing our cognitive capability, the sophistication of our understanding of these systems. Looping back to the first point, it's like energy and money. It's like people just don't think about this for the first 2 decades of their life. But if you vote and you contribute your intellectual capacity to our society, like we want people to be knowledgeable about these things, and it's happening. So any places that you do write or speak or tweet that you want to throw out there, or any shout outs?
You know what? I've committed to try to make it to at least one investor Bitcoin conference a month. So this will be we're a really new public company at Stronghold. So I'm trying to do a better job to get our story out. So I'll be at Bitcoin in Miami. I think it's in April. I think B. Riley has a conference on the West Coast in May, and I'll be speaking at that one. I think TPH has a conference in Houston at some point. So I think there are. Trying to do at least 1 or 2 a month just to help get our story out. And then I think I'm on LinkedIn. So I think if I'm saying something publicly, I put it on the LinkedIn link.
Nice. Well, I encourage you to keep tweeting or writing about ideas that you have that you think other people need to know, because you're in a great position. A lot of people respect you and listen to you, myself included. So go nuclear, go Stronghold. Thanks for your time today, Greg. It was really fun to get to know you. All right. Take care, man.